All right. Well, hey everybody, thanks for coming today. I appreciate you being here. You know what the topic is about today is a pretty big deal. I know most people here have been following along. Many of you helped support. Many of you voted for Proposition 1, and as many know, it was overturned. And now there are some ordinances coming forward that the mayor and her administration title the Home Ordinances, which is an acronym. But really, what they should be called is Prop None, because it is none of what you voted for, none of what you're asking for now. And we're going to get into that in a little bit, but sure appreciate you all being here. I'm so thankful for my guy, Michael Cathcart, being here, Councilmember Cathcart. Councilmember Cathcart, before I was even on council, had long been standing for common sense and reason, and he's a great seatmate, he's a great teammate, and I'm glad to have him with me on the council. I'm glad to serve with him on the council, yeah. All right, so good afternoon, friends. I want to talk about something today that really cuts through the noise of politics and hits at the core of what kind of city that we're trying to be. As everybody here knows, Spokane is at a crossroads, and the choices that we make now are going to shape our neighborhoods, our parks, and our streets for years to come. That's why Proposition 1 mattered so much, and it's why what's happened since has been so frustrating for many of us. When voters passed Prop 1, they weren't acting out of indifference. They were responding to real conditions on the ground, growing encampments outside of small businesses, trash piling up in public parks, sidewalks blocked, families feeling less and less safe in their own community. It wasn't about pushing people away. It was about restoring public spaces to the public and creating an expectation of order. The message from the voters was simple. Spokane, and especially our children, deserve safety and a basic level of respect for our shared spaces. But despite that clear message, the Washington State Supreme Court stepped in and overturned the people's decision. They didn't just strike down a policy, they effectively erased the will of voters and set a dangerous precedent. If the courts can simply nullify the outcome of a lawful initiative because they disagree with it, what's left with the people's ability to self-govern? The ruling was unjust, and it undermined the very idea that the citizens of Spokane should have a say in what happens in their own city. Now again, I mentioned how special Councilmember Cathcart is, but as soon as that was overturned, as soon as we figured out that it was because it was decided that it was an administrative policy and not a legislative policy, Councilmember Cathcart jumped on, Microsoft Word or whatever, but we got things going, and we took word for word what Prop 1 was, and we brought it forward to the council, okay? Because we brought forward a clean and direct fix. We could have just reinstituted that immediately. We introduced that exact language that the voters had already approved. We thought if the court took it down on a technicality, let's just pass it to the council and put it back in its rightful place. But instead of working with us, the council majority shut it down immediately. No discussion, no amendments, just flat out rejection. That decision didn't reflect a good faith disagreement over policy. It reflected a broader pattern of ignoring the voice of the people. These new ordinances pushed forward by the mayor's administration are called the Home Ordinances, but like I said, should really be titled Prop None. None of what you voted for, none of what you're asking for now, none of the compassion, and none of the policies that will make a difference. These ordinances sound compassionate on paper, but they fail in practice. They create more loopholes, more bureaucracy, and fewer tools for enforcement. They allow someone to camp in the same area for up to 7 days, which in reality means entire neighborhoods can become overwhelmed by trash, fire hazards, biohazards, and unsafe conditions in a matter of days. 7 days is long enough to leave behind serious damage, especially when city crews don't have the budget or the manpower to keep up. People often talk about engagement like it's a silver bullet. The idea is that if we simply offer services consistently enough, people will accept help. But here's what the early data of our core program shows. Only 7% of the individuals engaged in these situations actually engaged with services offered to them. 7%. Okay, there was 190 folks contacted, 7% actually engaged with services. Engagement doesn't work unless people choose to engage, and many don't. We can't keep building policies around an outcome that rarely materializes. This is why certain laws and our ability to enforce them matters. Sit-and-lie laws, for example, are not about punishing poverty. They're about protecting shared spaces and giving our officers the ability to act when someone refuses help and refuses to move. Because sit-and-lie laws are generally applicable laws that are indifferent to your housing status, okay? Without those laws, we're left asking officers to manage chaos without giving them any tools to address it. And when we tie their hands, we don't just lose control of the situation, we lose the trust of the community. We also need to be honest about capacity. Spokane is a very compassionate city, but we are not built to be a regional destination for people coming out of town seeking services. We have to prioritize people who are from Spokane, who have roots here, and who want to get back on their feet. I read this out a couple weeks ago from the dais at City Council, but in our 2023 point-in-time counts, we were asking people where was their last known residence. We had 173 people answer that question. And of the 173, 68 said that their last known residence was the state of Washington. Not Spokane, not Spokane Valley, not Spokane County, Washington State. Roughly 1/3 of the people that who answered that question were from Washington State. We do not have the capacity to be a national destination for homeless services. And honestly, pretending otherwise is not only unrealistic, it's unfair to the families and small businesses that are already stretched thin. And those resources, they're being reduced by the state, right? I don't know if anybody saw that Seattle Times article that came out today, but some of the funding that was coming from the state has been reduced. So the folks who are already in that program will be able to maintain that program, but all of our outreach funding from the state was removed. Our ability to respond in a timely fashion is shrinking, not growing. The 7-day rule becomes even more dangerous when you consider that our outreach teams, our cleanup crews, and our support services are all being asked to do more with less. Our budget is already under stress, and we can't replace those resources overnight. That means messes will linger, danger will increase, and neighborhoods will pay the price. And it gets worse, because under these new ordinances, if somebody has some camping gear, tents, tarps, sleeping bags, they actually may qualify for longer protections. And that means that we're going to see even more gear spread across our sidewalks and parks, not less. It incentivizes clutter and waste instead of encouraging cleanup and movement. And then there's the legal risk. This is something that when the Grants Pass decision overturned the Boise decision, they did so because it was determined that it's not cruel and unusual punishment to enforce generally applicable laws. But by specifically referring to homeless individuals, this ordinance actually creates a legal vulnerability for us. When we single out one group in the text of the law, we actually give future courts an opening to tear the whole thing down again. And then where are we at? Then we're in this same exact position without a fix, without a city with the protections that it needs. And that's the poison pill. It might sound helpful now, but it leaves us wide open to another legal defeat later. So where do we go from here? The obvious and clean answer is that we could just reinstitute Prop 1 exactly as the voters asked for it, and then we can move on from there. But until that happens, I'm so thankful for everybody's here. We've got to continue speaking up. We've got to continue showing up. We tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. We refuse to accept policies that might feel good but fail in real life. We insist on solutions that actually work for the people who live here and who want Spokane to thrive. We ask our neighbors to pay attention, to push back, and to demand better. And we keep believing that Spokane can be a city that balances compassion with action, order with opportunity, and vision with realism. That future is still possible, but only if we have the courage to fight for it. Thank you all so much for being here, and let's get to work, all right? Next up, I'd like to bring up my friend and seatmate, Councilmember Michael Cathcart.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming out here today. It means a lot. There's a lot going on, obviously, and so your attention is very well welcome. I'll just piggyback a little bit on what Jonathan just said. There's a lot to this. They're going to come out. Well, they have come out. The majority has come out and said this is a citywide camping ban. But it's not. It really isn't. This is a citywide camping permissive policy, is effectively what this is. The voters made it very clear at a bare minimum, they wanted their resources prioritized around enforcing these in areas where we can protect our kids, the most precious things that we have in our community. And with the eradication of Prop 1 by the Supreme Court on a ridiculous technicality that makes absolutely no sense, and the simple test is the fact that the council, in theory, could re-implement Prop 1 on our own accord immediately. That's how we know it's policy and not administrative in nature. But on a ridiculous technicality, Prop 1 was eradicated. We made great effort to re-implement immediately. And even when we realized there was enough pushback, we even said, hey, why don't we just put this in place right now, and we will agree to have continued conversations on how we can update, change, modify over time, and do it in a thoughtful manner. That was not accepted. Instead, what we got back was hostility, effectively. Taking the ordinance that I'd put forward to re-implement Prop 1, stripping it of all of the positivity, and replacing it with what we are going to be stuck with. And there's some pieces to this that folks haven't talked too much about. You might have heard a little bit, but it changes the definition of camping to say that it's an overnight activity. So you pull out your tent during the day, you're not camping under this ordinance. It completely eliminates from our code the sit and lie protections. And you're going to hear them say, well, actually, it implements those protections citywide. No. It only says you can enforce when somebody is obstructing. So that's first. And second of all, they love to cite the legal has given them this confirmation. Our legal department at the city has given this confirmation that, yes, in fact, we still maintain the authority to enforce sit-lie, and we can do it citywide. They don't have a legal analysis that says that. I've asked for it, and I've been told that no legal analysis exists. So for this leap to suggest that something can be enforced in a way that clearly it's written to do the opposite is obscene on its face. But that's what we're being told. So not only does it eliminate the sit-lie protections, it makes camping almost impossible to enforce with the 7-day pass, essentially. It says that all kinds of outreach and services must be provided first. And we want to provide services. We want to do those things. And Jonathan said this, those who really want the help, we want to help. And for the folks that refuse it and would rather do things that are contrary to what the law says, we don't have any laws against homelessness. We have laws against activities that create nuisance issues, drug issues, loitering issues, whatever it might be. We have ordinances against those, not against people, not against being housed or unhoused. That's not something we have. But with the 7 days, the mandatory services, the redefining, eliminating sit-lie, even modifying the pedestrian interference to narrowing how that's enforced, it's just a recipe for disaster. And the folks in the community that often violate these policies, they're very smart people. They will know what the law says. They will know how it can be affected and how it can be enforced. And they're going to know to push back. They already do. And oftentimes, they're in the right sometimes. And so we are going to put ourselves in a bad position. But there's a third ordinance as well, and I won't get too deep into this, but essentially it's not even a plan. They're presenting it as this plan that we're going to put into code. It's not a plan. It's the outline of what could be a plan. And it does not belong in our code. I believe it is going to give some abilities for administrative decisions that might be contrary to what the city, even the council and others want, and they'll base those decisions on these very broadly written statements under that home ordinance. So there's just a lot of issues here, and we're just talking about kind of the enforcement side for the most part. There's a number of issues on the other side. We just doubled down on the status quo of our 5-year plan to end homelessness, which I keep saying the name is absolutely absurd on its face. We have been adopting this for decades, and we continue to call call it the plan to end homelessness. And I think at some point you have to recognize either you're failing at doing it or that's not what this plan is actually going to accomplish. But either way, we are doubling down on status quo policies and considerations that is not going to make significant changes. In fact, we just heard on Monday that most likely coming soon is going to be some form of parking lot camping. No. It was just said on Monday that it is being worked on. Not that it has officially been determined or where or anything else, but that the idea is being worked on right now at City Hall. So we are in a very challenging situation with these ordinances, with what might be coming down the pike in the future, with how we're investing these dollars that we really want to use in a very high value way to help people to exit homelessness. The last thing I just want to comment on is the transparency piece. So the way these ordinances came forward, we basically had 12 hours notice, I would say, and I only found out prior to that because a reporter had reached out asking if I knew what a particular meeting was about, and it kind of came to the realization, oh, this is introducing these homeless ordinances. Get a call at 6 p.m. and told, hey, you need to come see the mayor at 8 a.m. the next day to find out about these ordinances. So I do. They won't provide a paper copy, and I find out at that meeting that there's already a press conference planned for noon that day. So there's no interest in collaboration. There's no interest in input. There's no interest in even being transparent of the radical way that we're re-envisioning these laws. But we also don't use the data and metrics the way we should. I've been on council for 5.5 years, and for 5.5 years, I've been trying to get our data. It has been very challenging to get access to the data to either defend or show that what we're doing is or isn't working. Only in the last few months have we started to get regular data analysis and information, but it's all curated, it's all filtered, and it's only what they want to show. And so we need to have access to all of that information. The public deserves access to as much of it as possible. We need to make sure that we are operating in a way that is transparent for you all. If we are providing money to a provider and they're not being successful, we need to know that. We need to make better decisions. If we are spending money on a program and that program is simply not working, we need to know that so we can make better decisions. And if we are doing some things that are in fact working, we need to know that so that we can continue those, maybe invest more into those programs, providers. But we got to be smart about it. We got to be thoughtful about it. And, I keep hearing we can't slow this down. We can't do something different because we have to move really, really fast on this. And while I agree, we have to move fast in a broad sense because people are literally dying on the streets. We also want to get it right. And if we're doing something that is going to take us backwards, then that is going to be worse, I think, than slowing it down by a week or two to try to add some thoughtfulness to this. So I'll leave it there. I want to thank everybody. I'll be here for questions, but I want to thank everybody for turning out. This is great. Thank you so much. Again, happy to answer questions and can stay and chat with folks afterwards for maybe a few minutes. So.
Yeah. What can we all do? Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's continuing to demand that your representatives represent you the way that you want to be represented, right? I mean, because realistically, before Prop 1 was overturned, we didn't need more laws. We didn't need more money, right? We just needed enforcement. We just needed, clear leadership on it, and that's not what we were getting. And so I would just say continue to reach out to your elected officials and make sure that they know that you don't like the way that you're being represented and that they need to do so. Yeah. Yeah, show up Monday. Monday is the votes, and so show up on Monday. Gretchen reminds me all the time to remember to tell everybody, show up to a city council meeting, make your voices heard, let people know where you stand on this, because it's very important for them to see you saying this and not just us, because I'm sure at some point they just start tuning the two of us out, and so we need other people saying it as well. So
Sign-up's open right now, too.
Sign-up is open right now. Yes, Gretchen. Yes. So parks land and library land is unique in that it was separated off in the charter. So the park board, of which I've been the liaison my entire time on council, the park board does make the decisions for the parks and not the city. And so park board has sent letters telling us we do not support these ordinances. We have another ordinance coming forward in a couple weeks to designate portions of parks non-public so that ICE can't come into the parks. And the parks board has also said we don't support this one either. We're not going to make portions of them non-public. Now, the tough part becomes like your parks right here within these borders, that's all under the park's control. The road right there is not. And so even though it's not necessarily on the park, it can be park adjacent and still ruin the parks, which is why Prop 1 said within 1,000 feet, right, of parks, schools, daycares, and anywhere where children were going to be. Because the idea was we need a safe and clean space, particularly for our children to play, to where you don't have to worry about foil, you don't have to worry about needles, you don't have to worry about these things when you're just trying to enjoy your park with your family. Yeah. Yes. The specific enforcement tools that the current ordinance or the proposed ordinance is lacking. Yeah, obviously sit and lie. So this is one where, again, 75% of people in the city of Spokane wanted Prop 1. When we did our homeless roundtables, 2/3 of folks said that they wanted sit and lie citywide, and that is something that's actually being repealed here. Now, again, they're going to say, actually, we're making it citywide, but it's just not happening, okay? Because pedestrian interference and sit and lie are completely different things. I can be sitting on a sidewalk and not impeding pedestrian. I can be sitting on a sidewalk and not blocking, not obstructing anybody's path, but still causing problems for the area or the business. And then that's not even to go into things that we have heard from these, which is not just sit and lie, but we probably need something about loitering in the city. And so we're looking into that, because it's not just people sitting or standing in a business. One of our frequent commenters at City Council, Mr. Will Healings, tells us all the time about, what's happening at the Rid Path. And they're not necessarily sitting or lying there. There's just a ton of congregation, where drug use may or may not be happening. And it does create problems. And so those are things that we need to see enforced, or first adopted and then enforced in the city. And sorry, I'm dominating if you want to jump in.
No, nice.
Yeah.
I think you covered it.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you so much for taking the question. So obviously before today's presser and stuff like that, reaching out to the city just to kind of hear, because we're getting stuff into our newsrooms as well.
Yeah.
Kind of from the mayor's side of things and all the different maybe things that have been talked about for the last couple of weeks here. And more specifically, they laid out like a fact sheet. I'm not too sure if you've seen it or not, but talking about myths that are kind of surrounding these different ordinances that they want to do for these the home program that you're mentioning. And the number one thing that we were just talking about was that the obstruction and unauthorized camping ordinance repeals sit and lie or expands sit and lie citywide. Obviously just kind of talking about the topics at hand today, these are just some of the things that the city is aware of and saying that that's not exactly true. So I guess the question there is just kind of like, how do you kind of balance that out with you guys saying one thing, but then the city coming together and kind of balancing that?
Yeah, really good question. So basically it was what you guys are saying versus what the mayor is saying are not gelling very well, and so how do we separate that? I've got some thoughts, but I know you
just real fast. I'll just say, and it goes back to what I said earlier. They don't have a legal analysis that's defending any of the things they're saying. When the writing in the ordinance is so clear, you can't confuse what it says, how it defines things. It's very clear. And so to say these things without a legal opinion, a legal analysis, it's absurd. So I do not believe that they are accurate when they say that this will allow them to enforce sit-lie citywide. It very clearly does not provide that authority to the city, to the police, to any sort of department.
Yeah, and I would say, past history is a good indicator of future action. And I would say that when you looked at it, we brought forward a clean sit and lie ordinance, right? Which removed every reference to homelessness, because again, if you're writing laws that specifically target a group of people, that's obviously not a generally applicable law. And so we brought forward a clean version that again was just a generally applicable law, and that was deferred indefinitely 5-2. And so I see the things when they're talking about, we're enforcing Prop 1, and yet everybody is here saying, why are we not seeing the enforcement? Why is the enforcement not happening? Why does it feel like our voices aren't being heard? Again, I would ask everybody in this crowd right here if they think that the new ordinance, which is supposedly expands it if you think it's going to be enforced, because I have a hard time seeing how these things are the same, number one, or if they're even going to be enforced. So yeah, we'll take one more and then yes.
Hi, thank you very much, guys. I really enjoyed your comments. I think that I really appreciate that you guys talked about how the 5-year plans, successive 5-year plans, have failed every single time. We've seen homelessness grow out throughout the region. I guess my question for you, because even my council, Spokane Valley City Council, is now following Spokane's lead on these unfortunate plans. How do we convince our leaders to stop going the wrong way?
Vote them out.
Right.
That's a really good question. I mean, obviously, pressure from the community, from constituents is probably the primary thing. But I would just say one of the things that's been missing, and we've only had one now since I've been on council, but our joint meetings with other jurisdictions. We just had one with the county not too long ago. I think there's another one planned soon. But we need to be having those with the Valley, the county, potentially Airway Heights, other jurisdictions, and even multi-jurisdictional meetings to talk about these issues, because we just signed an ILA with the county, the Valley, the city, on homelessness. That ILA doubles down on the status quo issues that we've all been doing in our silos, or that we've kind of somewhat been collaborating on with staff behind the scenes. But it doesn't do anything that's bold. It doesn't do anything that's innovative. It doesn't do anything new to change the game. And it's time that we actually start to think about how do we truly address this issue. And if we're not going to solve homelessness, end homelessness, what are we going to do to manage it and to make sure that we are incentivizing the right outcomes and prioritizing the right folks that need the help?
And quickly on that, I would say one of the things that we really need help from is we do need help from the federal government as well, because most of the money that we get and that we spend on homelessness comes from our federal partners, and we get a fair amount from the state as well, who follows basically federal guidelines. And the Housing First as is, well-intentioned as it is, creates real problems for us when it comes to an accountability piece. And what we really need is we need pathways for folks who are wanting to change their life, or, who had a bad bill or whatever it is. We're happy to help, but there also has to be that accountability piece. So you got to have pathways and penalties. And unfortunately, we are lacking on that second side of being able to make sure that folks are acting in accordance with the social code and what we expect of everyone who lives in the city of Spokane. So hoping that our federal delegation would help us out with that, because that really would be a huge boon for us. If they allowed local jurisdictions to be able to set their own policies, then we could separate ourselves from Seattle or Portland or San Francisco and lead the way that the city of Spokane wants us to lead. So, yeah. Hey, everybody, again, just want to say thank you so much for being here. I'm so encouraged by the turnout and the amount of people that came. Councilmember Cathcart and myself will hang out for a little bit to chat if anybody has any more questions. But again, thank you all for coming.